This is Houston Newsmakers. Actually, we're talking with Dr. Matthew Mancini about the convict leasing system. The book he wrote, One Dies, Get Another, Convict Leasing in the American South. Matt, we were talking about this whole system, but I'm just curious, how minor could offenses be for people to get arrested, to actually happen to be basically enslaved into this system?
Again, thanks for the question, and let me say that while I appreciate the praise that you're giving me for my work in the book, there are many historians who have written and are continuing to write about convict leasing. And not to contradict you, but there's not just one book about convict leasing in the American South. There's a lot of good stuff that's been done. And as in terms of the particular question about offenses, again, it's very a historian like Mary Ellen Curtin, Douglas Blackman, others show that there's no crime wave or anything taking place to speak of in the years of the 1870s. One of the most common, quote, crimes doesn't exist anymore. It was vagrancy. And sheriffs throughout the South rounded up guys from oftentimes from railroad cars and brought them before a judge. And of course, there wasn't any Miranda warnings or the right for indigent people to have representation. And they would take them before a judge and then take them out to the Turpentine Woods or wherever they were going to be sentenced to. Mm-hmm. So vagrancy was one. Another thing that happened that again makes yours a good question is that certain offenses were reclassified. For example, in Mississippi and Arkansas, other places, stealing a pig or cattle or a sheep, in the case of Mississippi, a valuable $1 or more, was made into a grand larceny with a 5-year sentence to the penitentiary. So,
5 years?
Yeah, in Mississippi there was a period of about 5 or 6 years during which there was a 5-year sentence for stealing a pig. It's called a pig law, commonly. So the law changed in the period after, especially after Reconstruction, in ways that were kind of designed to entrap and to capture, again, black labor. I have to say also that an African American could end up in prison for doing something that a white man would be perfectly fine. Talking back to a policeman or something of that sort, impudence, and would turn into resisting arrest and the like.
So it sounded like it was a system that was once it got in place, it was very well entrenched and very difficult to get out of it. What was it that led to the convict leasing system ending?
Here you have to give some credit, and I probably gave too little credit, possibly, in my book. I made the point that the reformers didn't make much difference. Perhaps they did. There were significant reform movements in virtually all the states to get rid of convict leasing. But they have to remember that convict leasing has a history, and it goes over until, as I say, about the First World War. And things were happening in the South in terms of industrialization and in terms of cars, and in terms of vehicles. People want to have better roads and better systems of transportation. And also, and I emphasize this point, over time, these leasing contracts rose in price. Convict leasing became less and less super profitable in the early 1900s. So the system is losing its profitability. It's very inefficient. It's a very inefficient form of labor, and states are beginning to see that we need to utilize, to allocate our labor system in a different manner. So these things all come together in the states at about the same time. in the early 1900s.
So, there have been a lot of controversy on the 1619 Project, talking about how much African Americans contributed to society and the growth and all that kind of stuff. I'm guessing, obviously, there's a whole different category as opposed to convict leasing. But what kind of projects typically were convict leasing convicts assigned to? Was it agrarian more than anything else, or was it other things too?
Here it varied in every state. The states were quite diverse and are quite diverse. So there's a diversity, and then there's also a uniformity in convict leasing. So in the state by state, the type of labor varied from state to state. Here in Texas, you have sugar, which is one of the worst kinds of labor in the world, and historically is one of the most deadly and dangerous types of of labor. Sugar, you have cotton, and you also have wood chopping, timberlands. In Georgia, turpentine, cotton, coal mining. Alabama, coal mining. South Carolina, plantations. North Carolina, railroads. So it did vary from state to state. Florida was phosphate mining was the most important. So all kinds of labor, most of it, as the term is, extractive. Most of it is extracting raw materials. So things like mining and agriculture would be the most important categories.
Well, it's certainly all of that qualified as hard labor too, it sounded to me.
Yeah.
There was nothing other than hard labor. Dr. Mancini, or Matt, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I look forward to seeing you at the Remembrance coming up in Sugar Land, coming up later this month. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great to see you. Thank you very much.
All righty. Hey, this is Houston Newsmakers Extra. Share this with everybody you know.